Any human institution is going to let us down. No human institution is going to be perfect. And they're important. They're very important. When they run well, it's great. But even the best institutions are still human. And if we make them idols and expect that they will be our salvation, we will be let down. But the love of God will never let us down. So this is a great opportunity, a teaching moment, you could say, for those who are newer to the Episcopal Church, or you just forgot this part when we did our last instructed Eucharist. But the preacher doesn't choose the readings in the Episcopal Church. We have a lectionary. It's a 3-year cycle, and as the 3 years runs through, ideally you hear the whole Bible, which is pretty cool. And this lectionary we call the common lectionary because we share it. We share it with our Roman Catholic brothers and sisters, the Presbyterians, the Lutherans, the Methodists, the United Church of Christ. We all read from this lectionary. So millions of mainline Christians around this country are hearing these same readings this morning. So if you go out to coffee with a friend later this week who goes to another mainline church, you can ask them what their pastor did wrestling with these texts in this time and place. Because I got to tell you, just to name the elephant in the room, it can be challenging. One of you sweetly said to me several weeks ago, I think it was right after Bishop Buddy preached at the inauguration interfaith prayer at the National Cathedral, that some of you think that I make walking a tightrope look easy, because we have a really diverse community here at St. Peter's. We have folks who see things from lots of different ways. And we have folks who have left St. Peter's because we aren't political enough. And we have people who think that we're too political at times, and everything in between. And then you run into a bunch of readings like we have today. And it sounds like I got up this morning and picked them because I want to be political and I have an axe to grind and I want to do it here. If I have an axe to grind, I'll do it elsewhere. I might. But I just want to name out loud that these are the readings that the common lectionary offers us together to chew on, and that the Holy Spirit is calling us to wrestle with. A number of my colleagues on Facebook and in a variety of clergy Facebook groups were saying, have you ever asked your congregation what they mean by saying, I don't want politics in church? You can imagine why we were having this conversation on Facebook this week as we were preparing to preach. And there were different answers across what people have said, what it means to have too much politics in church. And one of the ideas is that if it makes me uncomfortable, it's too political. Well, I got to tell you, friends, there is something to make all of us uncomfortable in the readings this morning. None of us gets off the hook in the readings this morning. None of us gets off the hook in the readings this morning. Because from start to finish, from Jeremiah to Luke, we have people who are engaging with the question of how we human beings together organize our common life. And that really is at the heart of anything political, is how we organize ourselves together when we do something as a group, as an official group. And Jeremiah is mad. And he is mad because the leadership of Israel have chosen a geopolitical alliance instead of trusting God. That is politics at a grand scale. And he is hot. He knows that this is not going to go well for Israel because the alliance, amongst other things, is with Egypt. Right? Take all you know about the founding stories of Israel and the role Egypt plays in that, oppression, enslavement. And they're choosing a geopolitical alliance with Egypt to try to save them from the Babylonians. It does not work out well. In the end, it results in the decapitation of the society and the carting off to Babylon of all the leadership of the southern kingdom. It's devastating. And Jeremiah sees this coming. And he says, those of you who trust in humans and human institutions instead of trusting in God, that is bad news. Bad, bad news. But I love this line. Blessed are those who trust in the Lord. Not just that, whose trust is the Lord. Not just whose trust is in the Lord, but whose very trust is the Lord. And the later refrain that seems like it comes out of nowhere and always falls, we always hear this right after Valentine's Day. The heart is devious above all else. It is perverse, who can understand it? Happy Valentine's Day. But truly, this is about where we place our hearts, friends. Where we place our trust is where we place our hearts. Do we put our trust in God? Or do we put our trust in an idol outside of God? Even a well-intentioned thing that is intended for the common good, if we treat it as more trustworthy than God, that's a problem. That's a problem. And that's where we start with Jeremiah. Psalm 1 is a post-exilic text. The Psalms are really seen as the hymnal of the Second Temple, the temple that was built after the exile. And it resonates, including this beautiful imagery of where a tree is planted that Jeremiah uses. We hear that those who are trusting in God, whose delight is in the law of the Lord, who meditated on it day and night, they're like trees planted by streams of water, bearing fruit in due season, with leaves that do not wither. Everything they do shall prosper. It is not so with the wicked. They are like chaff which the wind blows away. Both of these passages remind us that we have a choice of where we place our trust. That is the human journey, is choosing to place our trust in God over and over and over again. And we have to do it over and over again because it's not a one-time event. We spend our lives practicing putting our radical trust in God and God's love over and over again. And then we come to the gospel. And this is Luke's version of this sermon. And it is similar but different from Matthew's. Some of us like Matthew's Sermon on the Mount better than Luke's Sermon on the Plain. We're going to get another week in the Sermon on the Plain next week. There's more to come, friends. But it's always important at looking where the evangelists differ and how they tell the story. You can see something important there about what they think we need to take away from Jesus' life and his teaching. And whereas Matthew is kind of more ethereal and theoretical, blessed are the poor in spirit, Luke is much more concrete. Blessed are the poor. Blessed are those who are hungry. Blessed are you who weep. Blessed are you when people hate you and exclude you and revile you and defame you on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day, he says, and leap for joy. What's also fun to hear about this version of the Beatitudes is the context of the Sermon on the Plain, yes, but who else is there? The 12 apostles. So he's already appointed the 12 to be the ones who take out the good news, who are sent with the good news, and a multitude of disciples, those who've come to learn, and they're from everywhere, the insiders and the outsiders, from Judea and Jerusalem and the coast of Tyre and Sidon. Remember, we've encountered Tyre and Sidon before, and they are not just Gentile territory, they're the bad guy Gentile territory. They're kind of the worst of the worst neighbors in this context. Talk about insiders and outsiders are all here to be healed by Jesus and to hear what he has to say. When he then turns the world upside down. Blessed are the poor, the hungry, the weeping, the excluded, turning the world upside down. None of that sounds like a blessing to our ears. But it resonates, doesn't it, with the sermon we heard him preach 2 weeks ago, his first sermon in the 4th chapter of Luke's gospel, when he riffs on Isaiah. Blessed are the poor. Well, yeah, I come to bring good news to the poor, release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. That's the Jubilee year. That's when all debts are canceled, all injustice made right, the world turned upside down. But Luke, that's Luke's thing. And it didn't even start with this sermon. We can go back to what we heard in Advent. It wasn't that long ago, even though this is like the longest Epiphany tide ever. It wasn't that long ago when we heard the Magnificat, Mary's song that turns the world upside down. When the rich are sent away empty, the mighty are cast down from their thrones. It's a world turned upside down. And a lot of us like Matthew's Beatitudes more because they don't pair up with a bunch of woes. These woes are unique to Luke's gospel. But it's important to know this translation of the woe to you, it's actually trying to take an onomatopoeia and put it into English. It's actually the sound whoa. It's kind of like yikes, or that sort of teeth-sucking sound. Caution, whoa. It's not a curse. It is not a curse, but it is watch out. There's danger there. Watch out, those of you who are rich, who are full, who are laughing now, and when all speak well of you, whoa. Pay attention. And this is where I say there is something to make all of us uncomfortable in these readings. Because even a person living in the United States living on Social Security disability is richer than much of the planet. We living in the wealthiest country in the world and in history, that is extraordinary. None of us is off the hook here. None of us is off the hook. What does it mean in this context to be planted by streams of water? What does it mean in light of this gospel to put our trust in God? When frankly, the status quo is a lot more comfortable than a world turned upside down. Regardless of where we find ourselves, regardless of how we're moving about this world right now, regardless of how we are taking in the news and making sense of it and finding meaning in it, the message is the same. We are called to place our trust in God. Any human institution is going to let us down. No human institution is going to be perfect. And they're important. They're very important. When they run well, it's great. But even the best institutions are still human. And if we make them idols and expect that they will be our salvation, we will be let down. But the love of God will never let us down. There's an alternative reading that we don't hear today from 1 Corinthians. It's Paul doing his most Paul on resurrection. It's very convoluted. It's one of those moments when you wish Paul had taken a moment just to edit himself. And we'll get more on this riff next week as well. But the bottom line is our trust in the resurrection. Our trust that God's love is transformative. That God's love is faithful. That the love that can bring life out of death, light out of darkness, joy out of pain and despair, that love is trustworthy. And if we are placing our trust in that love, then we can weather any storm, And we can get through any season of instability, any season of confusion, any time when the world is turned upside down. If that is where our trust is, if that love is our trust, we will be the people God needs us to be. Even in a time like this, we will be where God needs us to be, to bring the healing, grace, mercy, and love in the world that this world so desperately needs. And if we show up where God is already blessing, then we can be a part of God's dream coming true. Amen.